This is a story that most people don't know about. The story of the two Santas. That's right, two. You see, it's like this. There hasn't been just one Santa all this time. Instead, it's been more like a kingship or lineage kind of thing. A passing on from father to son. Father teaches son, son grows up and has a son, and passes on to him the trade of being Santa. So this is how it was. One child born to one Santa again and again for hundreds of years, until one day, not long after Christmas, Mrs. Claus, or Doreen, started feeling a little funny, sleeping a little later, crying over silly things, and knitting. She was constantly knitting. So much so that every elf at the North office was covered head to toe with clothing Doreen had knitted. Note here, just because she was knitting doesn't mean that the elves were proud to wear what she had made for them. It seems that she had a hard time judging the size, for one. And then there was the part about the extra sleeve or leg that just didn't sit well with the elves. She even began to knit for the reindeer, and that's when, to the relief of the reindeer, she thought,
I am better knitting for 2 legs than 4.
From the stories that her mother had told her, she knew that she was finally going to have a little baby. Now, I know that it is hard to imagine a little baby Santa, but that's how it was. The Claus family was so happy, especially Santa, who was looking forward to having a son.
I wonder what he'll look like. He'll be a Santa one day, so he can't look too much different than me.
Santa knew this was the way it had been for a long time. The passing, as the elves called it.
The passing. That happened. I remember that.
The end of his time as Santa and the beginning of his son's journey. He was excited about teaching him the trade of being Santa. Doreen had a feeling that this was a special baby. You know, a different feeling from what her mother had told her. She knew this was going to be a unique child, and from the beginning, there were unusual things. She ate more. Not so unusual except for what she ate.
Pickled jelly ham salad, a very rare combination in the North Country.
And of course there was the knitting. This was going to be a special child in a way that only mothers can know. As the months passed, Doreen's tummy got bigger, and the elves more covered in bad knitting. Then one day, the knitting stopped. It was a cool evening at the North office. Santa was with his staff reviewing the year's events and planning for next year.
So, in terms of deliveries, we covered the entire route in a timely manner, and we were able to fulfill our commitments with no unhappy customers. It's pretty much the same every year, isn't it?
Santa went on to congratulate the elves for their hard work and talk about toys and all the stuff that good Santas had done for centuries. In the cabin, Doreen sat by the fire and thought of what might lie ahead for the Claus family with the birth of the new child. Maybe Santa would be home more. This would surely keep him close to the cabin, especially on these cold nights when the fire seemed not quite warm enough.
Candy cane production up 40%. Fairy dust production up 30%. Toy trucks.
Santa tried his best to keep his attention on the reports as the elves droned on and on.
0%.
One by one, they went through the stats of the year's run, production this and delivery that. It was almost unbearable for Santa.
No animals were harmed in the process of making this Christmas.
And he was about to call it a day when Dr. Ephraimson, the elf physician, burst into the room and yelled almost nervously,
It's a boys!
The elves turned to each other saying,
He said boys. That's not very funny. He'll be in the stables next year. Santa never jokes about children.
Santa calmly stood and raised his eggnog to toast the new arrival.
To my new son, I propose a toast.
All the elves stood and cheered, except the good doctor. You see, he hadn't made a mistake. There were 2.
You don't understand, Santa. It's 2. The boys is 2. You have 2 boys. They're twins, Santa.
A hush came over the room.
2? Is it true?
How could this be? It had never happened in the history of Santa. Not with his father, or his father's father, or his father's father's father. The elves checked the records, not even in the history book of the strange language. Nothing about it, anywhere. How then could this be, and what would it mean? 'Cause everybody knows there can only be one Santa. Just like that, with the birth of an extra baby, the history of Christmas would change forever. Who would be the one to run the North office? Because twins never make good rulers, always fighting over things, and usually one is good at something the other isn't. How would it work? Who would take the reins, so to speak? And for the other son, the second-place son, what would be his fate? This certainly was the talk of the North office.
Oh, this could shut us down.
One of the elves said as he looked at Santa.
Who will listen to all the reports and, two Santas, oh my gosh, no one would ever believe that.
Santa huffed away and headed back to the cabin to see these twin Santas. The door opened slowly to the cabin as Santa entered. There in the nursery was a large bundle covered by a soft blanket.
Is it true?
Yes, they are too.
Oh, my. This is a strange thing, Doreen.
Yes, it is. But they are both your sons.
Well, what am I to do? There can only be one to take my place.
Yes, but I'm sure with time, you will see a way.
Doreen moved closer to Santa.
They both have the gift, I can tell. And there is a reason that they are here together.
But twins? It can't be.
Santa said as he pulled the blanket back a bit to see his sons' faces.
I'm so proud. This is a wonderful moment.
Now, little is known about Mrs. Claus, Doreen. She comes from a family of 7 children. Unlike her husband, she knew the way things could be in a large family, and from the start made sure that the 2 boys had their own identities. She couldn't call them both S.J. or Santa Jr., as had been done in the past, but if she didn't give them some sort of name, how would they tell them apart? Doreen decided she would give them each a nickname. She named the whiny one
Saw,
and the quiet one
Ta.
And as they sort of fit their names, it was easy to tell them apart. You see, when Saw cried, it sounded like, well, a baby ho-ho-ho. Ta mostly just smiled. Doreen loved them, and as they grew, she sang to them and told them the stories of their father. How brave he was in the winter of the Sigma 23, when the snow was so heavy in the air that every time Santa would breathe out, it would form a snowball. And when Santa had spent a little extra time talking to a child about,
it's better to give than to receive.
That's his favorite topic, And it put him so behind schedule that he almost missed his last stop on Christmas. She raised them and loved them both equally. But for Santa, this was a troublesome task. Now, don't get me wrong, he loved his children more than life itself. Think about it, your dad is Santa. But he knew that one day he would have to make a choice, and he really didn't want to make it. As he spent time with each of them, he found it harder to face the inevitable. He knew that he could only have one son take his place, but how could he choose between them? As they grew older, it was obvious they were twins in name only. As they reached their stride years, those are teens in our time, Santa would have extra chores for them to do, but they were funny chores, like sleigh driving and ho-ho-hoing to the working elves, who, incidentally, were secretly keeping notes on how each child did. Sa was exceptional. He was a natural Santa. The elves could tell. He could make toys with the best of them. Even the reindeer loved him. Every reindeer except Dado. He had always been a little grumpy. But Santa tolerated him because he was loyal and had a good heart. Ta, on the other hand, had a little trouble with some of the chores. He would not quite get things right. His toys seemed, well,
a little more creative than normal.
And the reindeer, they just didn't warm up to him, all except Dado. He seemed to take to Ta almost from the beginning, like a big old fluffy dog. As the days passed, it was obvious to everyone, even Ta, that Sa was a perfect Santa. Perfect red clothes, perfect toys, everything. Now, mothers have a way of helping in a way that only mothers can.
Ta, everyone has a mission in this life, And often what we think it is turns out to be something totally different than what we expect.
I'm not a good Santa, am I?
If hearts were the only measure of Santa, then
Doreen moved closer to him.
you must always remember that you have a special gift that only you can give. Not your brother, not your father, but only you. And the day will come when you will be called upon to give that gift. And you must be ready.
But all I know is being here. Santa stuff, I guess I could.
I don't know what your father will decide, but whatever the outcome, you were brought to us for a purpose. And you must never forget that.
Now, one more thing. As brothers, Sa and Ta loved each other. Sure, they had their troubles. Just like most brothers, they would be pals one minute and at war the next. But they always worked it out, sometimes with a little help from Mom. Well, the days passed, and it was obvious to most of the inhabitants of the North Office that the day of choosing was close at hand. The reindeer were restless, the elves were antsy, and Santa looked more and more troubled. Gazette, special event coordinator for the North Office, posted a notice on the main board by the stables.
Oh, special announcement today! Gather all to hear Santa!
The entire North Office was abuzz.
It's got to be Sa.
One elf said.
I mean, Ta is nice and everything, but...
Now everybody knows that elves never talk bad about anybody, but when that elf said,
I mean, Ta is nice, but...
you knew that was a very big but.
Attention!
Gazette commanded.
Santa would like to say a few words.
Gazette turned to Santa and in a whisper asked,
Is it all right?
Santa nodded.
If you have to.
Gazette cleared his throat, and with all the polish of a prize fight ring announcer, he belted out,
And now, from the North Office, in his bright red suit and wet beard, let's give it up for Santa Claus!
He turned to Santa to get his approval. Santa nodded and then turned to Doreen.
Got to keep him busier between Christmases.
He turned back to Gazette, who was still on the last syllable of his name.
Well, thanks for the warm introduction, Gazette. I know you all are wondering who will take over as the next Santa. It has been a difficult decision for me, and frankly, I have had many sleepless nights trying to decide. So I've decided to hold one final competition, a series of events in which both my sons, who I love unconditionally, will compete. It will consist of toy building, reading bad writing from kids, reindeer roping, magic dust throwing, and hopping into your Santa outfit like a fireman, jumping into the boots, and then running to the sleigh.
Most of the elves thought the last one was a silly event because you know when Christmas is. It's not going to surprise you.
And we will start immediately.
He turned to his sons.
Are you ready?
Yes, Father.
So began the first in history test for Santa. First was the toy building.
Gazette?
On your mark, get set, go!
At first, Ta and Sa were neck and neck, which was appropriate because they were building a toy giraffe. But when Ta got to the painting part, he made some extra stripes and dots. Then there was the third eye.
Finished!
Sa yelled as he put his toy on the shelf. Ta looked up at Sa's toys and then back to his as the head fell off.
Okay, next event.
Gazette looked at Ta.
Yeah, not bad, son.
He comforted as he held up the headless giraffe.
Okay, this event is the harness of the reindeer.
Gazette read off his list. They moved to the stables. Dado whinnied as Ta walked in.
Dado, old boy, it's not looking good. Sa is better. Much better. But what am I to do?
Dado whinnied again, as if to say,
Don't give up.
The crowd entered, and Gazette stood upon an old crate by the door.
The harness of the reindeer.
Ta thought,
I can do this, and Dado will help. Good old Dado.
And with the insistence of Santa,
You have to get into full event day gear before entering the stables. Pants, boots, beard, and bag.
Uh-oh.
Ta thought. Since he was a little boy, he'd always had trouble with pants.
Go!
It wasn't that he didn't like pants, but he just had trouble with the name Pants. They made him feel tired when he thought about it.
Ta, I said go! Sa's already getting dressed.
Ta had done it again, thinking too much, and now he'd thought right through the get ready, get set part of the go. Ta ran toward the Santa gear as Sa was finishing up.
Hurry, Ta! You can still make it!
But Ta knew it was going to be a tough race. He didn't give up, even though he could see Sa had entered the stables. Ta put on his coat, and then there were the pants.
Stop thinking about pants,
he told himself, and for a moment he did. Everything was on, and he was running toward the stables, but something was not right about the pants.
I have to stop thinking about the pants.
He looked down and realized he had the pants on backwards.
This is not good.
He entered the stable and saw that Sa was well on his way to finishing.
Good boy, Dado,
Ta said as he slipped the harness over him. Dado seemed to purr.
How is it that a reindeer can purr?
Ta thought. That's what cats did, but reindeer? And then he heard Sa yell,
Finished!
Then we have a winner!
Gazette announced.
What?
Ta said, but the purring, and then there were the pants. They just didn't feel right.
Oh, in first place is Sa.
Gazette proudly spoke, and then sort of under his breath said,
Yes, second place is Ta.
Even though he tried his best, Ta just couldn't finish first. Second best was as good as it was going to get for Ta that day. And that day was the day that counted. Gazette knew it, Doreen knew it, even Dado knew it.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
The elves were heard to say. So the next day it was made official at a formal gathering in the main office. Gazette called the meeting to order.
Attention, everyone. Santa has an announcement.
He looked over to Santa.
Is it all right, Santa?
Santa nodded, and Gazette turned to the assembled group.
And now, from the North Office, in his bright red suit and wet beard, let's give it up for
He turned to Santa to get his approval. Santa nodded, and then turned to Doreen.
This is almost painful.
Mm-hmm.
He turned back to Gazette, who was still on the last syllable of his name.
Thanks for the unique introduction, Gazette. I know you all are wondering the outcome of the competition, so I will have Gazette read the scores from the judges.
Gazette stepped up again.
Thank you, Santa. Judge of the toy building score is 49 to 50. Judge of reindeer harnessing score is 48 to 50. And judge of kindness and warmth score is 50-50.
Hey, a tie!
Ta thought as he looked over to his mother. She smiled, and then Dado caught his eye. He was smiling too. That was one special reindeer.
And the winner is...
Gazette shuffled the papers, mostly for suspense, because he already knew the answer.
The new head of the North Office, and whom we will affectionately call Santa Claus, is... Sa!
A cheer went up from the crowd. Sa looked surprised, and he was. A good Santa never takes anything for granted. As for Ta, he was almost relieved. And even though Sa would never say, he really wanted to be Santa, and Ta knew this. Ta knew that Sa was better at some things that were really important to being a good Santa. Children depended upon it. And what's the most important thing about being Santa? Yes, that's right, children. So that's how it was. Sa got to be the next Santa with a big celebration, and Ta got to, well, that was an issue. What was he going to do? All this Santa training, all the red clothes, all winter apparel? Not much call for the number 2 guy when it comes to Santa.
I suppose I could help out around here, and
Ta said as Doreen listened.
Then maybe I could...
You gave it your best, son. And your father and I are so proud of you.
The door opened, and Santa walked in. At first, he didn't see Ta.
What a wonderful celebration. It's just as wonderful as my...
He stopped short as his gaze landed on the two of them. He took a deep breath, holding it for a few seconds. Ta knew that when he did this, it was going to be emotional.
Son, you were an extra blessing for us when you were born, and we are so glad to have you as part of our family. All life has meaning and purpose, and you will find yours. I'm sure of it. Until then, there is plenty of good Christmas work right here at home. Important things, and if anything should keep your brother from working, you'll be like a backup Santa. Very important in case anything happens, you know.
Father, have you ever missed a day of work?
Not a single day since they handed me the...
Santa trailed off. Just then, Gazette burst into the cabin.
Santa, sorry, but this just came in.
He handed Santa a note. It read,
"Quitting my job. I can't take the pressure year in and year out of handing out coal. Please don't try to contact me, as I will be far away from here. Yours truly, Teros." Unbelievable after all these years. Now that's what I get for outsourcing.
He turned to Doreen.
"We may be taking a trip to the South Pole. Had a misunderstanding with
He turned to Gazette, and then to Doreen. Then he looked at Ta.
That's it.
Sir, may I make an observation here?
He's not ready.
Ta, change in plans. Did you know that we have a South office?
Ta looked at his mother.
South office?
His mother looked like something, but Ta wasn't sure what. He hadn't seen that look. Wait, or had he? Yes, he'd seen that same look the day of the competition. It wasn't happy, it was... His father interrupted his thoughts.
"Son, I want you to go pack your bags and be ready to leave in the morning."
Ta had seen pictures of the beach, and waves and sand and surf to the south.
Leave?
Yes, and you can take one reindeer.
Take Dado, Ta. You will need him.
You are my replacement in the South office. It's the closest to the real thing I have right now. You work the same schedule as your brother. You get to wear the uniform. There is a sleigh with reindeer, a smaller group of elves, and well, this could be a good career move for you, Ta.
Ta had not heard of this South office. As far as he knew, there was only one Santa, so this was great news. Ta would do anything to stay in the business. How many Santa jobs are there? I mean, really?
So let me get this straight. All of the perks of Santa, and I get my own place. Let me think. I accept!
Ta said excitedly. As he did, he looked at his mother. She looked nervous.
Congratulations, son. I'm proud of you. Do the best you can do and remember the Santa Claus. Think red, be well read, and always be ready.
So the next morning, Ta gathered his things and started for his sleigh. The elves had already packed supplies for the trip. Ta looked forward and saw Dado.
Just one reindeer.
But with Dado, that's all he needed. Ta heard something and looked toward the cabin. It was his mother and father. They had come to see him off.
Ta, remember what you learned, and don't forget the jet stream as you cross the country.
I will, Father.
Do you have enough food for the trip?
His mother asked.
I think so.
Oh, he certainly does, ma'am.
Gazette stepped up as he looked down at his list. He was so good at lists.
His favorite, jelly sandwiches. 10 of them.
All right then, son. It's time.
Santa leaned forward and gave Ta a hug, and then Doreen hesitantly embraced her son.
I am so proud of you, Ta. You be careful, and remember, you will find your way. Trust in yourself.
Dado whinnied loudly.
Oh, and in your friends, old and new.
Dado snorted as Ta smiled and climbed into the sleigh.
Okay then. I'm ready. Goodbye, Mother. Goodbye, Father.
Ta, wait!
It was Sa, He had been busy with the new toy designs and almost missed his brother.
Be careful, and remember, you have a good heart.
Ta smiled, and then, with a last look at his mother, turned and nodded to his father. With that, Santa stepped up to Dado.
Don't take this personally, but...
Dado seemed puzzled until he was startled by a slap on his behind.
Get up!
With a jolt, Dado galloped off, pulling his sleigh up and away from the village. Gazette watched as the sleigh pulled higher into the morning sky.
Isn't he supposed to?
Wait for it!
Gazette said, calculating the seconds, and in the distance, when the sleigh was ever so high, a faint
Ho, ho, ho! There! Oh, it's an altitude thing.
Doreen smiled, a mother's proud but cautious smile. Higher and higher, Ta and Dado flew, leaving the comforts of the North Pole for the beaches of the South, or so he thought. He flew over Canada. Then came the beaches of the Caribbean.
Hey, that looks good. Could that be it?
But the sleigh kept flying further south, over Latin America, then the southern tip of the continent, then the ocean, and a lot of it. The sleigh flew on. The temperatures began to drop colder and colder until even Dado was having second thoughts. Then, with a jerk, Dado instinctively pulled down through the clouds and into a band of gently falling snow.
This is pretty nice,
Ta thought as he caught a snowflake on his tongue. Dado and Ta flew on, making their way through the patches of lightly falling snow. Down the sleigh went, further, and then finally, as it broke through the clouds, Ta could see the outline of a small village. He thought for a moment about the North Office and how this looked so different. He thought about all that his mother had said, and then in his thoughts he heard his father say,
Look up Tattoo. He will help you get settled.
And then he heard what sounded like a gasp. It was Dado.
This reindeer is not like the others,
he thought. But before he got too far with thinking about that, there was another interruption. This time more of a crack. You see, even with all that training that Ta had in the North Office, and even with Dado's years of sleigh experience, they had never encountered the atmosphere here. It was different at the South Office, thinner air. So airspeed was hard to judge, and, well, they were coming in pretty fast. That crack was the top of a sign, clipped by the sleigh as it flew over. Ta looked back to see it flip up into the air. He could just read the part of the sign that said South Off. The rest of the word ice was still on what remained affixed to a small shed. Ta could see commotion coming from the shed. As he turned back forward, Ta was alarmed to see a bigger, more permanent obstacle in their path.
Dado, pull up!
Ta yelled, but Dado had plans of his own. All his reindeer instincts were alert now. With a sharp turn to the right and digging in of his hooves, Dado spun the sleigh and Ta around in a whipping motion, crashing through several empty boxes marked coal and barely missing a large wooden cabin. The sleigh came to rest in the middle of what looked like a deserted ghost town. Except where there were supposed to be ghosts, there were these little, unkempt, grimy figures milling about in the shadows. If a town could have a bad hair day, then this would be the town. Ta thought he heard Dado say,
What the?
But he knew that Dado couldn't talk. So he said it.
What the?
Ta stood in amazement as more of these little creatures came out from the darkness to see what had just landed.
Elves?
Ta looked at Dado, but these were not the well-dressed, mild-mannered elves of the North Pole.
Oh my.
These elves were more gothic. These were elves with an edge.
You've got to be kidding.
Nope. Wish we were, but we are not.
A gruff voice pierced Ta's somewhat emotional shock at his new surroundings.
I'll take your bags. You can stay over there.
A grimy little finger pointed to a small shack with 2 shivering penguins on it.
We'll show you round in the morning. We'll have you up and running by the big day.
Several of the elves chuckled and mumbled,
Big day.
Dado, we're not in Kansas anymore.
All right. Tattoo, my name is.
the grim little figure uttered.
And that's the plan, boss, the plan. Your father said word you were coming. You're like royalty, so it's Is that...
Tattoo sneezed and wiped the snotty contents of it on his sleeve.
Honor.
Tattoo pointed to a mug hanging on a hook on the shed door.
Teros, his old job is your new job. We'll pay over the mug in the morning.
What happened to him?
Well, after about 700 years of the same surroundings, it needed to change.
You see, that was the thing about elves. They had a long lifespan and were very loyal, but when they decided to move on, they went, like the next day.
He cracked. Hated this place. Most of us here do, you know.
Bub, could you not talk? Oh, don't mind him, he has issues.
Issues?
Dato seemed to say.
Did he just say issues?
He's a reindeer. He can't talk.
But he knew that Dato had it right. This place did have issues, and it wasn't what he thought. Ta looked longingly to the north and sighed.
What is it about this place that could possibly be anywhere near my destiny?
Dato just sighed and lowered his head. Ta turned back and picked up his bag.
Thanks. I'm gonna unpack my things.
Tattoo smiled.
Sure. And if you need anything...
You won't find it here. It's so desolate. No one likes it. It's cold. The food is horrible.
When your lips move, it means you're talking.
Berm grumbled and walked away.
No one likes it. It's cold. The food is horrible.
Such a waste of talent. He's former head of the Happiness Planning Committee.
Oh, brother.
Did he just say...
Did you get the part about him being a reindeer?
And with that, he turned and walked to his shed, leaving Tattoo scratching his head. The rusty hinges of the cabin door moaned as Ta opened it. Inside, the dark, musty air was lit by a single candle. As Ta entered, the smell of something overpowering hit him.
Here, you left this. Looks like jelly sandwiches.
Tattoo said as he walked into the cabin.
What was that?
Ah, that. Well, let's see what you're ready for.
Ta took a step back. Tattoo lit another candle, and with the additional light, Ta saw that there in the bed that was supposed to be his was a little body making grunting, burping, and assorted other noises as they looked on.
Must have had a bad night.
Tattoo said, holding the candle closer.
Aren't the nights down here like 20 days long?
Not day, bad night. Long bad night.
Tattoo held the candle a little higher and stepped back.
Don't want to get too close when you wake him. You never know what you're going to get. Go on, go. Hey, go on, go.
The little creature opened his eyes slowly and, to Tattoo's relief, displayed a faint smile.
This won't be so bad.
Bad?
Well, you never know with him. Things just set him off, like butterflies or books or poetry. Oh, and the colour red.
Ta was relieved, as the first two items were not within 1,000 miles. But then he had a thought.
Did you say the color red?
Yeah.
Ta took a step back.
What am I wearing?
Santa uniform, standard issue.
And what color is that?
Ta asked as he took another step towards the door.
Greenish? No, that's not it. Blue?
Ta shook his head as Tattoo continued.
Actually, I'm colourblind and... yeah, that's why I got transferred here. I couldn't really tell the colour red, and you know, Santa's all about
red?
Tattoo stopped then and looked toward Gowango, who now, like a heat-seeking missile, had zeroed in on Ta.
Red! Oh my!
Tattoo and Ta both looked at each other.
Run!
They jumped out of the door, managing to pull the latch shut in midair. Hitting the ground, they looked up and saw the cabin rocking back and forth with the sound of crashing and cracking. Ta and Tattoo picked themselves up and rushed off.
Well, it can't get much worse.
That was a boip.
A gravelly voice from inside the cabin yelled out.
Be honest, you twit!
Sorry.
Tattoo turned apologetically to Ta.
Oh, you could sleep in a stable tonight. It might be a bit more palatable.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
Tattoo turned to leave.
If you need anything, just call. Well, let me think about that and I'll get back to you in the morning.
Now that was definitely a bleep.
Still smells.
Ta thought out loud.
Does not.
Does too.
Does not.
Does too.
Does not.
Oh, go on, go. I really don't understand what you're going on about. I mean, I know you don't like the colour red, but, you know, I don't like blue particularly, but, you know, you got to think about what it means to be an elf. What's not to love? So you got a little temper. Well, they say, yeah, a lot of temper. And it's red that makes you crazy. This is true. But what's not to love? You spend your time, you think a lot, you work one day, you eat a lot, then you burp and you fart, but who knew? And if you really want it clearer, then I can't be more sincerer from the start. It's all about the things you do and kind words that you feel from your heart. You get the drift? I think you should be by now. What's not to love? So you've got a smelly trouble with a burp or tummy bubble, and those around you just take offence. I mean, what's not to love? It is what it is, and it was what it was. I mean, that's just common sense. And if you see yourself in trouble, you can call upon your double, that's yourself. 'Cause there's no one any gooder, coulda, woulda, shoulda than an elf. That's you too, isn't it? You should be very proud of what you do. Very good, elves, pair of you. And when you feel the inclination of your mind's imagination, do your part. It's the hope of all the nation that you find the perfect station of your heart. You get the drift now, Burb? Go on, go. Yeah, you come out your red patch now, have you? Good. God, this is like Elton John playing, isn't it? I feel like I'm in a concert hall.
The next morning, Ta woke early. He was eager to start work on his new job. But as he walked to the main square, he saw no one. Well, those shivering penguins were still there on the roof of the cabin, but there was no sign of any elf activity. Then he felt a gentle nudge on the back.
Good morning.
Ta turned to see Dado almost smiling, but he knew that reindeer didn't smile. Ta and Dado walked to the small cabin where Tattoo lived, knocked and waited for what seemed like hours before Tattoo finally opened his cabin door.
You don't look so good.
Got that right.
Tattoo looked at Dado.
He just said,
Reindeer.
right. What is it?
I'm here to start work. I've got a lot of ideas, and I can work with Burm, I think, so I'm...
Kid, did they tell you what your job is here?
Ta took a breath.
Well, yeah, I'm an official Santa. I make deliveries on the big day and help take the load off the North Office.
Yeah, but did they tell you what you'd be delivering?
Tattoo asked as he scratched his backside.
Well, I just assumed that it would be, you know, toys and candy, the typical stuff.
Oh, no. Let me show you our toy assembly area. This way.
Ta looked back, and Dado seemed to say,
Oh, no.
Tattoo led them to a dingy old structure at the edge of the village and opened the rusty hinged door. Light flooded the inside of this old barn.
This is what we do here.
Ta eased his way up to the opening, and all he could see were wooden crates stacked high to the ceiling, labeled coal. Dado whinnied a sad,
Oh, brother.
Oh, I see.
Ta said slowly. He knew right away what this meant. His father had told stories of the bad children. Ta remembered how sad he and Saw would get as they listened to their father's words.
Lumps of coal?
Well, I'm afraid so, son, but there's always hope for the next Christmas.
So that was it. Ta was the Santa who brought the coal.
Oh, did you know that coal is a 4-letter word?
That explains a lot.
With a deep breath, Ta slowly turned and walked back to the stable.
It's not that bad, Tar. You still get to work with Burb.
Tattoo tried to console him, but it was what it was. Second. As the days passed, Ta noticed that there was no sense of urgency here, like in the North Office. Berm, Gawango, even Tattoo seemed to not care much about anything. You see here, the only thing that elves had to make was coal, and Ta's job was to deliver the coal to all the bad kids in the world. Now, the elves weren't complaining. I mean, think about it. They had one product, coal. That was it. No fire engines or dolls that say mama to make, just coal. How hard is that? This job seemed easy, and most of the elves had the same impression. As Berm would often say,
"Oh, don't mess up a good gig. We wake up, go to work once a year, pick up essentially what are some rocks and load them into a bag, and then go back to sleep. In exchange for that, we get a place to stay. Even though most days are 80 degrees below zero and 3 mostly warm meals a day."
On the surface, the free food part seemed like a good deal, except for one thing. The cook here at the South Office was an orphan. In his early childhood, he was adopted by the giant rat elves of Bilbatraz, and, as you know, though they are very polite, often going well out of their way to say Gesundheit, they have adopted the island custom of using the hair from their heads to season their food. The cook has honored that tradition to the point of premature hair loss, so the elves are constantly picking hair from their teeth.
Some nights it's the only activity we have. But we're not complaining,
Berm was quick to add. Ta was determined to make the best of this situation. He thought of what his father had said.
And remember, someday I might call upon you to deliver not the coal, but presents to the good children. So be ready, Ta.
So each morning he would wake up, dress in red, comb his beard, and practice. You could hear,
"Ho, ho, ho."
The cold air was hard to get used to in the morning for Ta, but he kept on, morning after morning, and sometimes into the night. He would plan, study charts, and look at chimney diagrams.
English chimneys are slightly different than American chimneys. You enter from the left, you see. It's complicated,
he would be heard saying, mostly to himself, but Dato was always listening, always close by his side.
Don't give up.
Ta didn't give up. If he were ever given the chance to make the run, he would be ready. His first Christmas Eve was quite uneventful, except for it being one of the biggest small events to ever happen at the South Office. You see, most of the time the South Office got overlooked by the press, but this night was destined to be different. Ta was from the North Office, Ta was royalty, and Ta was nervous. Even with all the practice, he still had never been under the real pressure of the magic hour. He looked over all his paperwork, studied his maps, and double-checked his list. Nigel Hall, Stacy Smith, Alec Thomas, then the reason for the lump of coal. Didn't tell their mom the truth, 1 lump. Pulled the dog's tail, then when asked, didn't tell the truth, 2 lumps. And then there was Joshua. His name was on the list, but next to it, where it was customary to find the explanation for the coal, was nothing but an official signature and the stamp of the North Office.
Tattoo, is this a mistake, Joshua?
Tattoo looked over the list and found the boy's name.
No, this is the way it is. Been so for the last 2 years.
And is this right, 5 lumps of coal?
Tattoo double-checked his list again.
2, 3, 4, 5. Yes.
This doesn't seem right. Contact the North Office. I would hate to make this little one unhappy on Christmas.
Just then, the official Santa siren began to ho, 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 ho. The reindeer pulled at the sleigh. There were 8 now, with Dato in the lead. Tattoo yelled over the siren.
No time now. I'm sure it's right. The North Office never makes a mistake. It's the North Office.
He strapped down the bags of coal and gave Ta the high five, elf style, which was great for elves because they knew what it meant, but Ta hadn't been anywhere but the North Office, and they didn't have the high five custom. As he walked away, Tattoo said,
I'll worry about him.
He held his high five in the air as he walked by Berm.
You know what this means, right?
You have to go potty?
Ta then climbed up into the sleigh, the first time for him on official business. Even though the children on the other end of this trip would not be so glad to see him, he still felt a sense of pride. That first time in the left seat, that was something. He reached down for the reins, first the left, then the right, just like his father had done when Sa and Ta were little. He thought for a moment how Sa must feel now, maybe the same. For a moment, they were both first. Ta pulled back on the reins, and Dado kicked up in anticipation of the journey ahead. And almost as if in slow motion, Ta turned to Tattoo, who was still explaining the high-five thing to Berm, but stopped for a moment to acknowledge Ta in his moment of glory.
Now.
Ta felt his voice crack slightly as he cleared his throat.
Onward!
And with that, Dado pulled at the harness and commanded the other reindeer to move. The sleigh shot down the main street, if you could call it that, and at speed pulled sharply up and into the night sky.
Oh my!
Ta said, and then felt this tickling in his tummy, first a little, and then so strongly that he could no longer control it, and out of his mouth came the biggest and loudest ho, ho, ho!
Gets me every time.
Tattoo said as he slapped Gowango on the back, but he forgot that slapping an elf on the back makes them ooh.
Berm, are you... I see a tear, I do.
No, you don't. I don't cry. I don't cry. Oh, my.
Are you in touch with your emotional side again?
Can I get a tissue?
Well, you're grumpy, Elf. Get with the program.
I need a tissue.
Tattoo turned to watch Ta climb higher in the sky. In the sleigh, Ta could see the light of his cabin getting smaller and smaller. And then, what a lot of people don't know, is that the reindeer sleigh combination, in conjunction with the red color of the suit, makes a kind of cosmic wormhole of sorts. It allowed time to suspend, so that Ta could make the rounds and still get back home. Kind of a dog years thing, ask your parents. So Ta was off and making his deliveries. He flew from house to house, climbing down chimneys and placing the presents next to the trees. Every once in a while he would encounter an apologetic child trying to explain this or that, even that Ta had the wrong address.
You want the Jansen residence next door, because I was a good girl this year.
Ta would inquisitively ho ho ho, and then he'd add,
"This is a gift of hope for next year. Be good for goodness sake."
He started at the top of the list and was working his way down when he got to Joshua. He just didn't feel right about this one. It seemed that all the other children were just as the notes had indicated, and he had no reservations about doling out the coal. But as he approached the next stop, things seemed slightly out of place. It was in the city, which by itself was not a big deal. Lots of bad kids lived in the city. But this was the part of the city where most kids had very little anyway, and to give really nothing for Christmas seemed not right. But what if he didn't stop and the boy got nothing? He would think there wasn't a Santa, and then where would the world be? So, with a right tug on the rein, Dado pulled the sleigh down over the rooftops of the run-down apartment buildings until, almost like a GPS tracking device, stopped exactly at 4513 North Broadway. This place was old and moldy, and there seemed to be not very much light coming from any of the windows. Ta opened his bag and pulled out a lump of coal, and he was headed for the chimney when he remembered that the notes clearly stated that the boy received 5 lumps of coal. He must have been really bad, Ta thought, as he retraced his steps and counted 4 more lumps of coal. 4, 5. The bag was empty.
Tattoo had this down to the last.
And these pieces of coal seemed much bigger than the others.
Hey, you with the red suit.
Ta turned to see a teenage boy standing in the shadows.
Give me your wallet.
Say what?
Dado seemed to say. The teenager turned to Dado.
Did he?
Reindeer. And what's a wallet?
The boy moved closer.
Are you, you're real?
Ho, ho, ho!
The boy dropped his knife and took off running.
I will be good, I will.
Tom moved to the chimney and made his way down into the building. He slid down the char-stained brick and could see little scrapes, maybe from the last to deliver coal down this thing. There was an etching.
Tattoo's here.
He gets around.
Finally, he reached the 4th floor and opened the flue to enter a dark and cold apartment. A candle was all that lit the room, and it was near its end. There was no tree, no presents, nothing, except a small handwritten note next to the candle. Tom moved closer to the light to see the words written by a small hand. Santa, thank you so much for all you do. Ta read this and thought,
this child has nothing, and I am giving him coal.
Ta double-checked the list, and the boy's name and the address were there. No mistake, but definitely a mystery. Ta reluctantly placed the 5 lumps of coal near the candle and took the note. Ta climbed back up the chimney and into his sleigh and headed home, pausing for a moment to look over his shoulder at the apartment building that was at 45th and Broadway. Almost as if they were on autopilot, Dado and the reindeer shot away into the night sky, and this was how Ta finished his first big day on the job. Now you might think that this wouldn't be such a good job for a Santa, but in some ways, it was just what Ta needed. It got him out of the village, he could practice his reindeer driving skills, and he was always hopeful that some of his customers would get off his list and have a happier Christmas the next year. Ta often enjoyed when the children waited up for him and tried to explain why they were on the list in the first place. Like Timmy, that's what he liked to be called, but it seemed that his mother was always using his proper name, Timothy. Timmy was personable enough and always very polite, but he could never quite make the good kids list. Ta had a certain sympathy for him and really liked to hear him try to explain away his
bad year. It really wasn't my fault this time. You see, a kid my age has pressures, and sometimes those pressures get the best of a guy like me.
Ta would listen and nod as if to say,
"Okay, we'll give you a break this time."
But rules are rules, and the North Office was pretty insistent about the rules. Of the repeaters, some were just bad kids, and would be that way for many Christmases to come. But then there was Joshua in the city, who didn't seem bad at all, and was always grateful for the coal that Ta brought, almost like it was a gift. He often left a small piece of bread for Ta. The others didn't do that. And Ta would often check back at his list to make sure that he had it right, hoping that maybe the North Office had made a mistake. But if he checked it once, he'd checked it 1,000 times, and it was always right. Life went on for Ta, and he continued to do what he thought was his destiny. Making the rounds, delivering the coal, taking the pressure off his brother. Still, he dreamed of the day when maybe he could be the one who delivered the toys and not the coal to the bad children of the world. Except that one boy, Joshua. Was he really bad? Ta didn't think so. Well, the next Christmas, things were destined to be different. Ta woke that Christmas Eve morning to pounding on the door and nearly fell out of bed.
Ta, come to the office right away.
What is it?
Oh, the North Office sent a messenger. She wants you right now. Oh.
Berm was breathing heavily.
He has such bad breath.
As he got dressed, he felt something was different about this day. Even Dado knew something was up and whinnied to Ta as he walked by the stables.
Doreen!
Ta looked back at Dado.
You said...
Ta?
Mom?
He looked back at Berm,
Oh.
then to his mother.
It's your brother. He's had an accident.
Is he all right?
He broke his arm making this new action toy, and the doctor said he'll be fine in a few weeks, and...
What about Father?
Yes, it's true. Your father is a great Santa, but he wants you to deliver the presents.
In one moment, his life, his dream had come true. He couldn't believe it. Berm immediately began to cry.
I'm so proud of you, Ta. Oh, I need a tissue. Oh,
He's been watching you, and he knows you've been doing a good job.
Once a Santa, always a Santa.
But what about the coal?
And then Ta thought about the little boy in the city.
You see, there's this boy.
His mother interrupted.
We have no time to waste. You have to go now. Tattoo will make your deliveries. Now hurry. The sleigh is waiting and the toys are packed.
This is it, Ta. You've been waiting for this moment. You're good enough to do it, I know. I've trained the best.
He trained your father.
So that's it. The whole time you were training me to be Santa.
No, not really.
Doreen frowned and Tattoo continued.
Hey, let's just say that's a maybe.
He said as he grabbed a few extra charts for Ta to take. Doreen took Ta's hand.
Go now and make the good children of the world happy.
Ta looked at Tattoo and smiled, and then at Berm, who by this point was a total emotional basket case.
No. Oh, where's my blankie? I need my blankie. Who has my blankie?
You never had a blanket, Berm.
Tattoo said as he tried to calm the situation. Even Gowango had come for the send-off. He was still dealing with his red rage, but seemed to have it under control. Ta made his way onto the shiny new sleigh. The first thing he noticed was the seat, much more cushion than his, and the reins. Let's just say that they were the finest leather that elves could conjure. For a moment he thought about his sleigh, and that first time he took off and flew. What an experience! And now it was like the first time all over again. As he sat back in his seat, he caught Dado's eye and was sure he saw the reindeer smile. This was it, for real. Santa.
Onward!
Ta commanded, and Dado jumped almost immediately into the air, pulling the sleigh and the other reindeer with him. Ta felt that familiar lump in his throat as he gained speed. This sleigh seemed to move much faster than his own as Dado pulled it into the night sky. Tattoo watched as the sleigh flew higher.
Isn't he supposed to...
Wait for it.
Dado turned the reindeer and flew the sleigh back over the village with a flurry. And at just the right moment, Ta let out the second biggest
Ho, ho, ho!
ever recorded in the history of the South or the North Office.
There.
Tattoo looked down toward Doreen.
It's an altitude thing.
Doreen smiled a mother's proud but cautious smile. Ta felt proud and thought about what his mother had said. He saw in his mind's eye his father being proud of him. And he thought he heard Dado say,
That's what I'm talking about.
But he knew that Dado was just a reindeer. Ta's first stop was the Johnsons' home, and Ta was a little nervous, but he didn't let it show. He slid down the chimney with a plop and opened his bag and placed the gifts around the tree. Over his shoulder, he felt a little set of eyes, and as he turned, the eyes got bigger, and the face that the eyes were on had the look of sheer joy. How good it felt to bring joy to children. This is nice, Ta thought, as he smiled and turned to leave. He thought of how his brother must have felt the first time he delivered the gifts, and then he wondered how Tattoo was doing with the coal. And I'm sure in the midst of the confusion that Tattoo had a thought for Ta. Ta made his deliveries, stopping here and there, and every once in a while he saw an old familiar face.
Timmy?
Santa, is this a good time to let you know that the whole mud on the carpet thing was not my idea? And
Ta reached into his bag and pulled out a nicely wrapped present and handed it to Timmy. He was still explaining what he thought was his way out of a bad situation when he realized he had made it, that the things he'd done, kids' things, were not so bad this year. He was getting better, or the rules were getting easier.
Santa, are you sure? I would hate for you to get in trouble or anything.
It's good, Timmy. You're on the A-list now.
Ta patted him on the head and turned to leave.
Thanks, Santa.
Ta smiled and climbed back up the chimney to his sleigh. He pulled the reins to head back, but Dado would not budge.
Come on, boy. We're done. Time to go back.
Nothing. Then Ta noticed that there was still one more stop left to make, an apartment building in the city.
Oh, I see.
The same building as the little boy with the coal, Ta thought, as Dado made the turn for the city. Could it be that finally the little boy, who all those years had gotten coal, was now about to get a wonderful present? The sleigh turned sharply and came to rest on the top of the very building that Ta had visited so many times before.
So, Dado, let's see what the lad gets. I hope it's been a good year.
Ta checked the list, stopping at the name Joshua. And next to the name was the gift. His finger moved across the page and stopped.
Oh, Dado, this can't be right.
Ta hesitated.
This has to be a mistake. My list is for the good children. But there's the name, and next to it 5 lumps of coal. Surely the North Office wouldn't have made a mistake as big as this. A little boy who still believes in Christmas? I can't do this again. What do I do? But this is a good boy, I know it.
And with that, Ta took a deep breath and dug into the bag for the 5 lumps of coal. Ta took the coal, climbed down the chimney to the 4th floor, and entered the same apartment and saw the same note, although the writing was better this year. This has to be a mistake.
But this is a good boy. I know it.
He placed the coal on the mantel next to the candle and was about to leave when out of the shadows appeared a young boy.
Merry Christmas, Santa.
Well, Merry Christmas to you, Joshua.
Santa, I know that you brought me coal and...
Do you know why?
Well, because it's what we need. You are so kind to bring it every year. It is just enough to warm our house in the cold months ahead.
You have been a good boy?
Oh yes, Santa. My family depends on it. This is exactly what we wanted, and I can't thank you enough. You see, my mom is sick, and the coal helps to warm us. It makes her feel better.
For a moment, Ta thought oddly enough of Burm and his emotional outburst, and was afraid that maybe he might cry now too. But he didn't. It was not the way of the Claus. All this time, he had thought that what he was doing was punishment for bad deeds. But it was nothing like that. It was nothing like he'd imagined. He had been the real Santa, at least for this little boy. And that made him feel proud, even more than he thought. Ta reached out with his hand to the little boy.
Thank you for believing in me.
And then to himself.
Even when I didn't.
I don't understand, Santa.
Your dreams, your hopes, it helps me to be. Without your good thoughts, without your wishes, I would be just dust.
You're not dust, you're Santa.
And with that, Ta let out the first biggest ho 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 in the history of the South or the North office. As Ta made his way back up to the rooftop where Dado was waiting, for a moment he thought he heard,
I told you so.
But he knew Dado was just a reindeer, and they couldn't talk. Ta climbed up on the sleigh and thought about what Joshua had said.
You're Santa.
He began to feel it, that tickling in his tummy. First a little, and then so strongly he could no longer control it. Out of his mouth came the loudest, happiest, Merry Christmas!
Oh, I'm so proud of you, Ta. Oh, I needed to show.
You could have given the elves of the South a bad name.
Proud of you, Ta.
I could see it now.
Narrated by Bruce L. Scott, the voice of Santa was Rand Burns. Doreen was played by Vonda Furman. Tattoo was played by Sarah Minot. The voices of Dr. Ephraimson, Gawango, Brum, Sa, and Dado were played by Mike Jansen. Ta was played by Adam Chandler. Additional players, Molly Hall, Tori Siegel, Michelle Telemont, Emily Wood, Charlie Curtis, and Melanie Jansen. Written and produced by Dan T. Hall.